Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Today we have a very special class. It's all about women, of course.
Very special.
So the reason why I picked a class about women is because last night was Chaf Shvat. Chaf Shvat is the day that the Rebbe's wife, Rebbetzin passed away. This is her day. So therefore, I decided that we need to do something to commemorate her day of passing, and so therefore we chose something about women. Okay, so and also very interestingly enough, there's a book called Hayom Yom, which is a book about every single day. There's a little piece about something about Chassidus, a little piece of each day written by the previous Rebbetzin Rebbe. And today's piece is very, very interesting because I think it's really connected to what we're going to do. So this is how it starts. Once, as the Alter Rebbe was leaving his room, he heard his Rebbetzin telling several women. Meiner says, mine. Meiner in Yiddish means my says. How is all of a sudden it's my? What does that mean? The Alter Rebbe told her, I am yours by virtue of only one mitzvah. What was the mitzvah? What mitzvah do you do to get married? It's the mitzvah of marriage. Mm-hmm. So I'm yours only by virtue of only one mitzvah. Could you imagine with how many mitzvah we are God's? He then fell to the doorstep, absorbed the state of dveikus. It says very interesting that the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, he actually was very, very much into really contemplating on something small and really thinking about it very, very deeply. That was his personality, the Alter Rebbe. Sometimes you would see him like fall down because he was so excited about this feeling. After emerging from that state, he gave a mystical interpretation. He says like this, Tzena ure'ena, go out and see daughters of Zion, meaning the Jewish women. Go out and see self-transcendence, and see godliness comes about by virtue of what? Of the daughters of Zion, in the Kabbalistic Metaphor of spiritual marriages. Malchus, which is the lowest of the Sfirot, which is the lowest of the 10 Sfirot. What are the 10 Sfirot? They are different characteristics of a person and different characteristics of God. So an example would be, the first one would be Chachma, which means wisdom, which is the highest one. What does that mean? What does Chachma mean? Wisdom. What does wisdom mean? I got an idea. Then you would go on to Bina, which means I understand it. Then you would go to Das, which is application. And then you would go through all the attributes. Chesed, which is kindness. When a person gets to loving kindness, that means that they're already getting a part of you in your behavior. Going all the way down to the last one, which is Malchus. Malchus means kingdom, kingship. And kingship is like a woman. Why? Because a woman accepts from others. She is not the person of doing. She is the person of being. She is. Because a woman is. She is who she is. It's not about doing, more about who you are as a person. So that's Malchus. And Malchus, what does a woman do? It takes from others and redoes it. Like a child that's born. What we see when a child is born, what happens?
Nurse.
Right? The father gives to the mother, and the mother makes the baby. Right? If not for the mother, there wouldn't be a child. So she is the state of being that in turn works out everything. And therefore, when we talk about the world, we also say that the world is created in circles. Everything that's the end is also the beginning. Just like Malchus is the end, the woman is the end, but she's also the beginning of new life. So how is she the end? She's the last creation. You know, when God created the world, who did he create last? A woman. But yet she's the first because she creates new life where nobody else can create new life. So that's about the woman. And that's why it's saying that Malchus arouses everything else, and a woman of valor will be the crown of her husband in the future. In other words, the woman, the feminine, will be a much higher than the masculine as the Messianic age comes closer and closer. And we see it already. We see how the woman has changed and evolved over the years. I mean, we look at now and we look about 200 years ago, we see the difference of where the woman is right now than they were before. So this is the Hayom Yom, and this was kind of like an introduction to what I'm going to speak about tonight. And tonight it's going to be the Eshes Chayil. When do we say this Eshes Chayil? When do we say this tefillah? When do we say this prayer of a woman of valor? Do you know when we say it? When do we say it?
When we honor women.
Friday night.
The man says it to the woman.
The man says it to the woman on Friday night. So this Eshes Chayil actually was created by who? Who created for the first forefather, who was who? Abraham. Our first forefather, Abraham, for his wife Sarah. Okay, so what does Eshes Chayil mean? When you think of a woman, what words can you use?
Nurturing.
Nurturing, okay.
Loving.
Dearest. Loving. Gentle. What else? Caring. Come on, get a little high. Kind. Come on, you're only on one side. Somehow you guys are so much on one side.
Keeper.
Keeper. Very good. Very good.
Strong.
Strong. Excellent. She's going to the other side.
Sacrifice.
Perfect. Sacrifice. Talkative.
Think about what you want a man to be. Then just say it right now.
But the interesting thing is when we talk about a woman of valor, we're talking about two sides. We're talking about, on one hand, we're talking about strength, power, wealth, virtue, honesty, courage, success, accomplishment, right? And then we're also talking about pious, straightforward, eager, adventurous, soldier, right? The woman's also a soldier. She gives birth, she creates, she also makes other people nervous too, right? Scared. She performs miracles.
Controlling. Yeah.
She can be controlling too, right? She can be successful, she can be mature. So on one hand, we see her wise. We see her as a soft, nurturing, nice, kind person. And then on the other side, what do we see? We see the warrior, the strength, the person who brings the faith in the home. Everything on two sides. So the woman is amazing. She has two sides of her, and yet it's the same person. So on one hand, a woman could be kind, but then the next minute she's drunk. So she has all of those virtues. It's just interesting that now our biggest challenge in this generation is that there's broken families and the support system of family is not like it used to be. So the woman in charge has to not just be soft, kind, gentle, nurturing. She also has to be strong, mighty, warrior. That's what we're talking about now. It's so much different than it was. And guess what? God foresaw this. How? Because he wrote the Eshes Chayil, woman of valor. The woman that's not only soft and nurturing, the woman that's a warrior too. This is woman of valor. Chayil means a soldier. So this woman is a soldier. She keeps everybody in line. She makes sure that everything is happening. So when we look at this Eshes Chayil, it said, Eshet Chayil, woman of valor, mi yimtza, who will find. So like we said before, that Abraham, the first father, wrote this for his wife Sarah at her funeral. Why? Because we see she was beautiful, spiritual. She was also a prophet. Not only that, she was a prophet. And she had Ruach HaKodesh, she had divine inspiration. And then it says, Mi Yimtza, who can find her? Where was Sarah? When the angels came to Abraham and they asked, where is Sarah? Where was she? She was in the tent. She was snua, she was humble. On one hand, she had strength, she was strong. On the other hand, she was very humble. She was at home. She didn't need anyone outside to validate who she is. You know that we have a hard time with validation? Sometimes we think to ourselves, you know what? Maybe I'm not so great. Maybe I'm not so wonderful. No, we need to look up to Sarah and know that she did not need self-validation or outside validation. She had self-validation. She didn't need outside validation. She didn't need other people from outside to say, whoa, you're so wonderful, you're so great. You know that Purim is coming up. And what was so well known about Esther? Her name is Esther. What does Esther's name come from? The word Hester. Hester means hidden, right? She was humble. Esther came into the palace. She could have said, ooh, I'm a princess. I'm a queen. I can do whatever I want. But no, she was humble. She went and listened to her uncle Mordecai, and she saved the Jewish people. She didn't show off. She knew that she was important, that she had to do something. The same thing with Ruth. Ruth is the mother, great-great-grandmother of King David. Ruth was a convert. She came to the Jewish people later in years. And even though she came as a convert, she didn't feel like a piece of dirt. She was humble. She was snua. She went out into the fields and she took the stuff very quietly. Didn't come out and say, I deserve it because I don't have money. No, quietly she would pick up the stuff from the field that belonged to poor people. And she wouldn't make a whole big deal out of it. And that's why Boaz recognized her, who was actually a great-great uncle of her ex-husband, the one who passed away. And Ruth married him, and from that union came out King David. So from humble beginnings comes out very royal people. And this is why we say the woman of valor, me and her, who will find her. It's the woman that's not found outside screaming and yelling, I'm so wonderful. No, she's found in different places, quietly, not so loud. Maybe she can say what she feels when she has to, but most of the time she's more humble. She doesn't have to show off. It's not that important. And the same thing was with Rebbetzin Chayamushka. It says that the Rebbe's wife, her name was Chayamushka, she did not go around saying, yay, I'm the Rebbe's wife, everybody look at me. No, she was humble. Even when someone found out, when she shopped in a place and someone found out who she was, she would go shop somewhere else. Yeah. But she was embarrassed. She did not want people to know who she was. And most people didn't see her coming out of her house. She would go from her house to the car and go somewhere else to shop, and nobody would see who she was and give her honor. Because she felt
too humble.
Okay, maybe too humble, but you know what? We're not Rebbetzin Chayamushka. We're not that high of a level. If we were on that level, you're right. But at least we could emulate a little bit of her, a little part of her. Okay, so then, we go down. Not just that, we have to understand that the women that were redeemed from Egypt were also humble. They were strong-minded, they knew what they were doing, but yet they were humble. It says, B'schus nashim tzidkaniyos, because of the women in Egypt, the Jewish people were redeemed. And the same thing before the time of Mashiach, because of the women, the Jewish people will be redeemed too. So what did the women do in Egypt? Do you remember what they did?
Yes, they collected jewelry.
They collected
jewelry.
But what did they do with the mirrors?
They brought mirrors.
They brought the mirrors
to
the men, and what did they say? Their husbands were working very hard. They would say, "Look at me, look how beautiful I look," and they would have children, and therefore the women were commended. And when it was time to make the wash basin for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle in the desert, Moshe Rabbeinu says, why am I taking these mirrors and making something holy if the mirrors were used for something maybe not so holy because they were going to sleep with their husbands? So what did God tell him? No, those mirrors are so much more special than you understand. Because of these women that sacrificed themselves to have children, even though they knew that Pharaoh would throw the boys into the river, they still went and had children. And because of these special women, that's why these mirrors are so much more special. And that's why you need to use those mirrors as a wash basin for them.
No.
Isn't it? So the 3 blessings were, again, the candles from Shabbos to Shabbos that lasted, the cloud
Cloud.
that was over her tent, and the
And
challah,
dough.
that dough that was beautifully. So what do we have? We have nourishment, we have peace, and we have light. So what's the nourishment? The nourishment is the challah, right? That's nourishment. Why? Because that gives people to eat. The peace is the cloud that hovers all over her. So in other words, she had peace in life all the time. And the light is what? That her candles were lit up every day of the week. From Shabbos, her candles lit up the world. So each day had light in it. So when we see those three things, we need to take something from it. This is who we are. We are the nourishers, we are the peacemakers, and we are bringing light into our homes. Not just our homes, but into the world. We need to be a light onto not only on Jews, but a light onto the nations. Every single person needs to remember that. Okay, so that is Sarah. Now we need to go to the next sentence. The next sentence talks about Rivka. Rivka is Rebecca, the second mother. The first mother was Sarah. Our second mother was Rebecca. And it says, the second sentence of Eishes Chayil is, Gam lasa tov v'lo ra kol yemei chayecha. She gives, she pays back to Yitzchak good and not bad all her life. So who is Rivka? What kind of personality did she have? She was what? Chesed. She was loving kindness. Remember the beginning of her life, of Rivka's life was where? What was the problem at the beginning of Rivka's life? She was living among Rishayim, among wicked people. She was like a rose among the thorns. And she was actually able to be kind even though she lived among wicked people. Which is interesting because when Eliezer, who was the servant of Abraham, went to look for a wife for Abraham, who did she find? She found Rivka. Rivka, why? Because Rivka was kind. She gave the camels to drink and also to Eliezer. So he saw her kindness in her. And then she said, later, when he wanted, so he went to her house and then she said, I will go. In other words, she knew that she had to get out of that place. She understood that she needed to go to a place that was more kind. In other words, she had that intuition. She understood God and she understood refinement. So when she saw Yitzchak, when she came to Israel and she saw Yitzchak, she lowered her head and she was also tznius because she didn't show that she covered her face. When she saw him, she realized that he was a godly man. And she understood that right away. So what did Yitzchak do? The first thing he did was take her into his mother's tent. When he took her into his mother's tent, why did he take her first in the mother's tent? The mom wasn't there. Remember, the mom passed away already.
I know, but still, the energy.
What was the energy? What happened when she came?
Was
but what happened when she came?
The same with Sarah.
Very good. The same what happened to Sarah. What happened to Sarah? Sarah had the 3 miracles happen to her. So when Rivka came into the tent, when the 3 miracles returned, he understood that this was his wife. And then he loved her. Which is very interesting to see nowadays people go first for love, then they understand the person. But the best kind of love is first to understand the person and see if it's for you, and then love the person. Because that love is a lot stronger. The second kind of love. And if we understand that this was the first shidduch, Yitzchak and Rivka, we need to learn from them that first you take her into your mother's tent. In other words, you first find out about her. You understand who she is. And once you see her spirituality and her personality, then you can love her. That will bring a different type of love that's a much higher love than the love which is called infatuation, which is nowadays love. Tell it to the young ones, right? Okay. So Abraham was more of a chesed person. He was very kind. He had many students, and he was also an outward kind of a person. What about Yitzchak? Yitzchak was more gvura. He was strength. He only had one student. Who was the student? Yaakov, his son. And he was more of an inward kind of a personality. if you understand Rivka, she took both parts. Why? Because Rivka was loving kindness. We said she was lovingly. But she took the loving kindness as an inner strength. Not just on the outside, but also on the inside. So she was able to relate to Yitzchak, who was more like an inward kind of a person. She kept the peace, and she made sure that in her home there would be no confrontations. That's how she paid to Yitzchak, because she wanted all the time to be peace. She brought the loving kindness and the strength together as one. She was such an honest woman that even her son, Esav she had two sons. One was Esav, one was Yaakov, Jacob, right? Two sons. And what happened? Her two sons, one became Jacob, was the father of the Jewish people. And Esav was not as good. He didn't want to be as good. He started to go and hunt and kill people. And Esav had special clothes that he killed people too. Yeah, he also killed people, by the way. Yeah. He killed animals originally, and then he also killed people. Because it says, Atzayid b'piv, he had it in his mouth to kill people. Not just animals, but people too. So he was not very, very nice person. And he also, when he went out to hunt for animals, he wore these special garments that he inherited from Nimrod. Nimrod was the person who actually took these garments originally from Cain. If you remember Cain and Hevel, Adam and Eve were the first ones. Cain and Hevel were the children. Remember, Cain killed Hevel, and Cain had to wander the earth, and God gave him special clothes that if an animal saw him, the animal got himself quiet. So this exact clothes Esav acquired. And every time Esav would go out to hunt, the animals would lie down because they saw these special clothes. So he'd be able to hunt much quicker. But he didn't think that his wives would be honest enough. So he gave it to his mother to hold, his special clothes. So we can understand that Rivka was actually very honest. And she also understood that Yaakov, the younger son, needs to get the blessings of the older son. Why? Because Yaakov was more spiritual. Esav was more hunting, physical. Yaakov needed the materialistic blessing to take all that material and elevate it to something more spiritual. So that's why he needed a materialistic blessing. That he should have more money, more wealth, more physical things, so that he can elevate the physical things for something spiritual. Like an example would be, what does it mean to elevate? An example would be nowadays, do a mitzvah. By doing a mitzvah, you take the physical table that we're sitting by, we study Torah, and we're elevating this table. Or we take a piece of food, and we make a blessing, and that's how we elevate the food. So we elevate the material to the physical. And the interesting thing is a bracha, which is very interesting, a blessing on food. Why is it so important? Because when we bless, what we're doing is we're elevating the piece of food and saying, God, I deserve to have this food. If you don't do a blessing, like, why are you eating? For doing what? You know? And also you need to use the energy that you from this food and do what with that energy? Now I'm going to make a blessing. Laura? What are you going to do?
She's silent.
How deserving.
Where can we find those plays?
Huh?
Where can we find those plays?
You can look it up. It's not a big deal. I can get it for you. No big deal. Yeah.
For the food.
Yeah, the food blessings.
Maybe
Yeah.
you could send it on the chat.
Do you want to send it in the chat? Okay.
Wait, I'm not on your chat. Okay, we'll cut it.
You're not on my chat?
No,
You are.
no,
Take
I'm
me
not.
for you.
You're not?
Okay, we'll put you on. We'll add you again.
I wonder if that was an accident.
I thought you were on the chat. Okay, well,
Oh well. Okay. So let's not go with the chat. Let's go somewhere else. Let's go back to. So here we have. Okay, so then it says all the days of her life. Okay, Kol Yemei Chayecha, all the days of her life. What was the words again? Let me see. Batach balav bailav, v'shal lo yachzar, v'masal avema, Kol Yemei Chayecha. Right. She pays back to good and not bad all her life. And what does it mean all her life? Because all the days of her life, whether she's sick or well, whether she's happy or not in a very good mood, she rose above the situation. So not only Sarah rose above the situation, but Rivka also rose above the situation. And she brought kindness to the world, despite the fact that she was a rose among thorns. Despite the fact that she was brought up with not such good people, she was able to rise to the occasion and always be joyful and find the good in everything. Okay, so that is Rivka. Who do we go on to the next one? Rachel.
Leah.
Rachel. Actually, we'll do Leah first.
Yeah,
Very good.
actually, Leah.
Okay, we'll do Leah first because it goes Leah Rachel because Leah was married to Jacob first. Okay, so it says by Leah, Darsha Tzemer Ufishtim Batas Bechepos Kapaha. So she looks for wool and flax, and she puts her hands to work willingly. So what does it mean she looks for wool and flax? Let's understand. So Leah gave Yaakov how many tribes?
Oh,
6 tribes. Very good.
6.
She said, Reuven, when Reuven was born, she said, Re'eh, Yaakov began to see me. So every child she had, she compared it to something to Yaakov. So she said, Yaakov began to see me because I have his child. Then she went on to Shema. He started to hear me. Shema means to hear. Okay, then Levi, he became attached to me because I had the 3rd son. Then she went on to Yehuda and she said, thank you, God, for giving me 4 tribes that I'm able to give Yaakov more and more and more. So the idea here is wool and linen are not allowed to be worn together according to the Torah. But Leah reached on such a high level that she was able to give 6 tribes to Yaakov. And even though she was not really the loved wife, she got herself above it and she was so connected to Yaakov like no one could be connected. She was already crying and crying that she should marry Esau, because originally she was supposed to marry Esau, who was the bad son, right? The wicked son. She wanted to marry Leah. Why? Because they said Lavan has 2 daughters. The older one should go to the older daughter, and the younger one should go to the younger son, The older one to the older son, and the younger one to the younger son. So Leah was the older daughter, and she didn't want to marry Esau. So she cried so many days and so many years and cried until God had Rachmanis on her and realized that she did so much tshuva and so much repentance that God let her marry Yaakov too. So she was on such a high level, she was able to reach a level of Geula, which means redemption. Why was she able to reach Geula? Because Geula means that I'm not looking on the everyday life. I'm looking above the everyday life. I'm looking at the Geula. I'm looking at redemption. I'm seeing the world with redemptive eyes. I'm seeing the world with positive eyes. Because what does redemption mean? Redemption means that I see the good in everything. That's my redemption. When I go out of my Egypt, my constraints, my problems and my things, and I see only positive in my life, that's the redemptive factor. That's where I redeem myself. And Leah was able to reach already in her life Geula, redemption. So that's what she really wanted. She wanted to get Yaakov, and she was able to get Yaakov even though she was not destined to marry him originally. And she was able to overcome, go above and beyond, and able to do that. Okay, so she got what she wanted. Now going to Rachel. Rachel, it says, Haita ka'aniya secher u'merchach tavilachma. So it says that she was like the ships, of the merchant ships, and from far she brought bread. To Rachel, kids were like very far off dream. She couldn't have children for so many years, and it was very difficult for her. Dealing with difficulty made her very strong. Rachel was not a mother for so many years, but you know what? at the end of her life, everybody calls her Mama Rachel. She's like the mother of all the Jewish people. Why? How did she become Mama Rachel? Where was she buried? On the side of the road. She was not buried with Jacob. She was not buried with Yaakov. She was buried on the side of the road. Why? Because she foresaw in the future that there will be a time that the Jews will go out of Israel and they will be crying because they're being led in chains. And she will cry for her children. And what will happen? God will have Rahmanis. But what did she say to God? She said, God, I gave special to my sister to marry. Why? Because what happened when they were supposed to get married? Rachel and Yaakov. What happened? Lavan was going to trick. And Rachel and Yaakov knew that Lavan was a trickster. And he would probably give Leah instead of Rachel. So Yaakov gave Rachel special signs. And interesting thing is, Rachel felt bad for her sister and she gave her the signs. So Leah wouldn't be embarrassed. Remember, they were twins. They looked alike. So it was hard to really tell them apart. So Yaakov didn't know that it was Leah until the next morning. Because it was dark. There was no light in those days. We didn't have electricity.
But also she was wearing a veil, I heard.
She was wearing a veil. There's all different things. And also
he couldn't see her.
Couldn't see her properly. Whatever the case was, it doesn't even matter. Even if he saw her, you couldn't see in the dark the difference because they look very much alike.
But you gave him all the simanim that him and Rachel had.
Right, which is very interesting. So what happened? So Rachel says, I gave the signs to my sister Leah, and I should have been jealous. I should have been jealous.
I do.
Stop for a second.
Да, привет. Да, я перезвоню.
Press the red button.
It's red button.
Press the button. Yeah.
Хорошо, спасибо.
That's
Okay,
it.
it's too late.
Don't-
It's too late. It's
don't
too late.
press.
Just leave it alone. We'll cut it out. Anyhow, so Rachel gave to Leah the signs, and you know what? Rachel should have been very upset, and she should have been jealous that Yaakov married Leah, and yet she wasn't. And so she says to God at that time, she goes, your children, what did they do? They served Avodah Zarah. They served idols. And you should have been very jealous of what? You shouldn't have been jealous of your children serving idols. Just like I wasn't jealous of my sister. And so God said, therefore, don't worry, your children will come back to Israel. And so it was. And that's where she got sacrificed. She sacrificed herself to gain more. She got what? She got good in this world and in the next world. Even though it didn't look that way, but Rachel did have 2 children for Yaakov. She did have Joseph and Benjamin, even though it wasn't a very long and a very productive life for her. But she was able to save the Jewish people that were being taken into exile and cry for them. And therefore, anytime the Jewish woman has any kind of problems, if you go to the gravesite of Rachel, you get answered a lot quicker. That's why she's called Mama Rachel. She's buried in Kiryat Arba.
Look, Beit
Lechem. I'm sorry. Kiryat Arba is
We
Hebron.
can't tell the truth.
Beit Lechem. Is that finished? So she's buried in Beit Lechem. Right? Beit Lechem. I'm sorry, I said Kiryat Arba. I don't know why I said Kiryat Arba. Beit Lechem. So in Israel, when you go to Beit Lechem, it's very hard. It's very hard to go there. Usually the best way to go to Beit Lechem is to take a bus from Jerusalem. They have a bulletproof bus that takes you right through it.
Palestinian side?
On the territories.
But
No, it's a Jewish.
But it is a
it's
Jewish area, and I'll tell you why. Because they have the whole way there are walls. Till you get there,
it's a
there are
safe
walls, so
trip?
it's very safe. And they have bulletproof buses just in case.
If it's not
Yeah.
a
So
safe
that's what
day,
they're-
the buses don't go.
Right, that's true.
Then you.
But many people go. Many people go every single day.
God,
Like a lot of people
Mashishim.
go.
The
That's
bus
what
is
they-
160, number
That's what the
160
narrative
bus.
You can close it to me.
No.
No, this is Rachel.
I know, but